Just when you thought Sarah Palin couldn't possibly prove to you that she could be any dumber than you already believe her to be. Palin is in the news again for mocking the credentials of Bill Nye, saying that he's as much of a scientist as I am. He's not a scientist. She is also a climate change denier who advertises herself as being skeptical of even science itself. An author of The Guardian was as equally awestruck by her level of stupidity as the rest of us, writing the following as a synopsis of her latest rant. Yes, don't listen to the person with the initials PhD after their name, or anybody who has spent decades in their respective fields of specialized research. Listen to the people who've attended a few years of community college, as their level of authority is definitely higher. The brainwash Palin refers to is called, by the rest of us, educational information, which is thoroughly investigated and re-examined by use of an empirical process utilizing critical thinking. But seeing to the fact that Sarah Palin doesn't appear to involve herself in a lot of critical thinking opportunities, it may not be impossible then to realize how she's as dumb as she absolutely is.
I want people to feel empowered to ask questions about what is being fed them from the science community, that something's not making a whole lot of sense when it comes to inconsistent data that is being produced and being fed, especially to our children, when it comes to global warming or climate change, whatever they're calling it today. It's perpetuated, it's repeated so often that too many people believe that, oh, well, I guess if 97% of all scientists believe that man's activities are creating changes in the weather, who am I to question that? Well, it's a problem right from the start when you're led to believe that 97% of scientists all agree that there is a consensus on global warming. Because Donald Trump is so reasonable and so full of common sense and knows that for America to be great again, we have to develop our natural resources. It's going to be helpful for the American public to know his view on it in terms of how do we develop our natural resources if so much of this climate change agenda is really just a political agenda to stymie development.
The problem here is then education or lack thereof, unless we want to be surrounded by a bunch of simpletons who refuse to step through their own cognitive dissonance and diluted worldviews. We must encourage scientific literacy in the K-12 education system at all costs, or risk electing idiots into positions of authority with access to our nuclear codes. Is ignorance bliss? You take a look at all the hell this woman brings to herself through her own stupidity, and you tell me. Perhaps Stephen Hawking was right.
Just keep looking at the phone.
Hi everybody, we're back on. It's good. So many people wrote in. So on this panel about with the climate change denial film, they say there's going to be that Sarah Palin will be there. Now, how much time you spent studying Ms. Palin's point of view? But I think they're completely wrong with respect to climate change. And this idea that one's personal experience with the weather is somehow more valid than the world's climate scientists is an extraordinary point of view that is not based in anything reasonable. And people like Ms. Palin, people like Mr. Morano, people like the other climate change deniers. The more names I mention, the more distracting it is. These people have children, they have grandchildren. And so they're right now not doing anything about the quality of life of their progeny, of the people that are going to carry their genes forward. And it's frustrating. The thing is, the United States is the most influential nation on earth. The President of the United States is the most influential person on earth. So without the United States in the lead on climate change, it's really difficult to get everybody on board. With that said, people showed up in Paris at COP21 and they reached some agreements which the climate change deniers, Sarah Palin et al., disagree with, but not for any good reason. They don't have any good reason to disagree. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. And why they stick to this seems to be connected to the fossil fuel industry. It seems to be now. You could say fossil fuel jobs, they're really important. We can't lose fossil. Okay, in my grandfather's time, people rode horses. My grandfather rode a horse into battle in World War I. And riding a horse was a skill. It was something you did. And people worked in the horse industry. They were livery, they were blacksmiths. They made the leather saddles and tack for riding horses. But when the horseless carriage took over, as it did in barely a decade, all those people went and did something else. I met a guy at Boeing a few months ago who was a stonemason. He worked with bricks and stones. And that business was tough. So he got a job at Boeing installing wire bundles. This is something you have to work with your hands. You have to work in a very skilled fashion. And he's making good money. And by the way, when you export billions of dollars worth of airplanes, the United States balance of trade comes out ahead. It's good. So that there are fossil fuel jobs is important, but changes are going to have to be made in the coming decades. How about coming year? And we can do this. We can change our economy. And by the way, everybody else in the world is changing to a renewable economy. And if they start imposing a carbon tax on the United States, then the United States businesses will be at a disadvantage, won't be able to keep up. There'll be effectively a tariff on all our goods and services here in the U.S. that are based on their energy is based on fossil fuel production. So it's another opportunity. And just let me say again, before we get too far along, I was not invited to be on this panel about a climate denial movie. And I did not have the opportunity to turn down the invitation. This is something that a guy named Mark Morano made up. And I presume he invented it. He invented this thing that he had invited me when he had not, and announced on the internet that I had turned something down when I had not, in order to somehow discredit me or make me look like I was not invested in his issue. But climate change is the most serious problem facing humankind, and why Mr. Morano would be disingenuous about this or mendacious or not tell the truth about it is something for you to evaluate. I mentioned this earlier, you guys, and everybody writing in has been very, very supportive. Thank you. And so what we're going to do, what I really want you to do, everybody, is vote. Take the environment and then writ large the climate into account when you vote this year. Right now, all three people still running for president on the conservative side are adamant climate change deniers. So they can be deniers now, but don't be surprised after they pick one of these guys, after the conservatives pick one of these people to be their presidential nominee, he, or it could even be she, changes and says, well, I've thought about it and climate change is a serious issue. If he or she, because the reason they would do that is because they need your vote. You've got to have your vote. But if they do that, just keep in mind that they've been on the wrong side of this for a long time. So if they do choose to tell you that, consider how trustworthy it might be. All right, you guys, this has been great. I really appreciate your support over the years, and together we can address climate change. We can make our energy production in the United States completely renewable. We can get 80% renewable in 15 years, 100% renewable by 2050, and we could lead the world and change the world for the better. Three things we want: clean water for everyone, reliable electricity for everyone on Earth, and access to the World Wide Web, or the internet, or whatever the next manifestation is of information technology around the world. We can do this, you guys. Let's celebrate science and change the world.